Order, order. Good afternoon and welcome to the Women and Equalities Select Committee. Today we're holding an evidence session on female genital mutilation, also known as FGM and shortened to that. First we've got 3 panels today, and the first panel we'll hear from is Aissa Edon. She's a midwife and founder at FGM Helpline. Bless you, Catherine. And Valerie, Lolomari, a founder of Women of Grace. Thank you all for coming and welcome. The first set of questions I'm going to hand over to Catherine for, which is about the prevalence of FGM.
Thank you both so much for coming and speaking to us about this issue. Just like to know what your current sense is on the prevalence of FGM in the UK and whether you think things are getting better or worse. I don't know who wants to go first. I'll let you choose.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. So, in the UK at the moment, it's about 137,000 women and girls that are affected by FGM. And this was a study that was carried out, I think, between 2014 and 2015 on that national scale. And since then, nothing much has been done. But having said that, the acute hospitals, they carry out a study every quarterly that they need to report back to NHS Digital. And I've got the stats for last year. Between April and June last year, they had a total of 2,175 individuals that attended the clinics where FGM were identified. They had another 3,960 attendance that was recorded across the NHS Trust and practices. And then out of these lots, they had 985 newly recorded women and girls. Newly recorded means that this was the first time that they were being seen at the clinics and recorded on the database. And so collectively, since 2015 April, we've had about 36,600 women and girls have attended NHS services where FGM has been identified. Do you want to pick up from there?
I think, so Valerie told you the numbers, so I'm actually not a very number person, so maybe that's why I'm here today. I'm more about, for me, one person with FGM is one too many. And I think I represent more the side of the survivors today, and the size of the maternity care, because I'm a midwife as well, and the impact in the maternity and in the childbearing and all the consequences after. I think that's why really we need to talk about. And it's not about numbers, it's about quality of care, and it's about how impacted women are during one of the most challenging and most important parts of their life due to FGM.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Before you start, again, Catherine, the reason why we need to know the numbers, we also need to know like how much resources, how widespread, if there are patterns that we can identify, if it's going up, if it's going down. I completely agree. We need to hear both sides, which is why we've got a fantastic spread of panellists today with all different expertise. So do feel free to just talk to your areas of strength. Absolutely, Catherine.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Chair. So are there cases of FGM actually happening in the UK now, or do you think not?
So, it's absolutely happening every day when we're talking. The evidence, again, is about evidence, but we do not have evidence, like real evidence, unfortunately, but we do know because we have our networking. We also know how FGM is spread and working and how it's embedded in the communities and in the cultural background of community. So it's happening every day in the UK, in the UK soul. So it's either we are bringing FGM practitioner to the UK to have it done in the UK soul, or the little girls are brought out of the UK and they are UK citizens and or UK born, and they are brought up to the country of origin where it's practicing, the practice is there, and that's where they've got the FGM done. But in the UK, so we do absolutely have people, FGM practice in the UK.
Okay, so in my opinion, most of the cases that are recorded are for survivors who had been caught before they came to the UK.
Okay.
Now, it might still be going on in the UK, but we really don't have proper evidence for that. One of the ones that will make us feel as if it's still happening here is the East of England case that happened, I think it was 2019, where the little girl was rushed to hospital because she was bleeding, and it was now confirmed that she had been caught. Apart from that, we do not have any proper physical evidence to show that it's actually happening here. So even if it's happening, it's underground and they're hiding it, and we don't have the proper physical evidence.
Okay, thank you. And what communities in the UK are most likely to have survivors of FGM?
Again, in my opinion, I would like to think that we think is Africa, because you have 30 countries of Africa practice it out of the 55 of them in the continent. So that makes it very high, and we turn around and think it's Africa. But FGM can be practiced anywhere, absolutely anywhere. Asia, Northeast, anywhere. It can happen anywhere.
So obviously we've got a high prevalence of Somali community in the UK, and they are the one who've got most of the time the type 3 FGM. So I believe that everybody knows how many types of FGM are there. And the Somali community is one of the most prevalent community with female genital mutilation. But like Valerie said, we do have other communities, so Nigerian community. We've got also some of the Ghanaians. It depends. Like the prevalence will be a little bit less because there is less people coming. They will go to other countries. But I think the higher prevalence is with the Somali community. But you also have to understand that now our community things are evolving. We've got mixed race marriage union, and it's because it's a cultural practice. Even the child who's going to be born from this mixed union might be subject to FGM because of the cultural background of the father or the mother, and that's something we also need to. So it's not only black skin, it's not only African people who are affected by female genital mutilation. So we have to be really careful and mindful about just making it as an African issue. It's a global issue, it's a worldwide issue, and it's not only black skin or dark skin or brown skin. Everybody is involved in that.
Thank you so much. And just to apologise, I have to leave early, sadly, but
okay.
Thank you for coming
Thank
today.
you.
Thank you, Catherine. Rosie.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard about it being so prevalent around the world, and obviously it's not just black girls who experience this. What would you say, either of you from your experience, is the main driver? I hesitate to use that word because there's no excuse or reason, because it is violence against women and girls, but would you say that there is a common kind of thought behind doing that? The survivor that we spoke to said that girls who hadn't been cut were considered to be prostitutes. Is that something in your experience that is common?
Yeah, I think it's a misconception of purity. That's one. And also to make you eligible to get married. I was mutilated when I was 16, and my grandmother thought she was doing it out of love and preparing me for marriage. But the sad thing was that I got married to a man who's from an area that doesn't even know what FGM is. Yeah.
Aissa, do you want to?
Yeah, so there is a lot of false belief behind FGM. So the list is endless, but let me give you a little bit. So obviously purity is one of the primary idea behind FGM. Being able to marry your children is one of them. But when you go back to the FGM practice started. So also there is a very huge false belief that FGM is religious. It's not linked to any religion. FGM, we find FGM practice in mummies. So I don't think we had any of the religion at the time. We didn't have Christianism, we didn't have Islam, we didn't have Judaism, and none of the Holy Bible, holy books are stating FGM like a requirement. So that's one thing we really need to nip into the straight away. The beliefs is more about it's a cultural things that happen, and it's done out of love a lot of times. So just for Valerie shared her story, my story is kind of similar, but I wasn't as old. I was 6 years old. I was supposed to be son for being adopted by a French family, and when I left, few months before I left for my adoption, at 6 years old, they decided to practice FGM on me, to send me with a gift of culture. My little sister at the time was only 1 year old. So it was not about being pure, not about being married, not about being not promiscuous. And also you can see it in, I'm originally from Mali. When I did my midwifery dissertation, I went to Mali to do my midwifery dissertation to understand where this coming from, where FGM is coming from, why it's still going on. And when I went to Mali, I really understood that, first of all, they don't have an understanding and that's not something we talk about. It's just part of the culture, and that's what we do. Also, it's more about, they say you're not going to be promiscuous if you go to, if you have FGM, but they did a study, there is more prostitutes with FGM practicing on them than non-FGM prostitutes. So again, it doesn't cut off the problem. We talk about the hygiene as well. And the hygiene, one of the complications of FGM is fistulas. So women, they're going to be with wetting themselves, peeing on themselves, pooing on themselves, and that's going to be not being clean. So again, that's a lot of false belief that we have the right and we should challenge every time we hear this kind of, so it's not a religion purpose. It's not to be more clean. It's only for the control of the women's sexuality. And also one of my mentors is here, and I always loved when she was in conferences and saying about, also one of the other thing is about men, the power of men, and also the fact if the sex of the men touch the clitoris, the men will be infertile or can die. So comfort, we can let them die, yeah? So it's really important to challenge all these things, yeah? So it's about also, I'm a midwife, they say that if a child touch the head of the child touch the clitoris, the child will be disabled, will be having mental health problem. So again, that's something we can clearly challenge.
Gosh, thank you. How do members of affected communities tend to react to campaigns against FGM? I mean, I know my friend Nim Kohali has had death threats, for example.
Some members support the change and they come on board to protect the women and girls. Some other communities are very resistant. They don't want you to talk about it at all because they believe it's a deep-rooted culture. And the others also adapt the medicalization bit of it, where they think if you do it properly in the hospital, it doesn't make it right. It's still illegal. It still hurts. We heard about the story in Egypt where some children were killed even though they had to do it through the hospitals.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Rosie.
Sorry.
Yeah. So can you just repeat the question to make sure I've got the...
Yeah, I was just saying, how do people in the communities react to people who are arguing against FGM? I mean, it sounds like from our survivor, it sounded as though it was a very dangerous thing to do?
Okay, so I think and again, I'm very French and maybe not politically correct, but I'm going to really say what I want to say. I think it's why in UK most of the survivors are a little bit sensitive about how about the campaign against FGM is about how we approach the situation. It's how about we, without understanding the culture behind, we decide that FGM has to be looked at like we look at domestic violence, look at child abuse. It's a child abuse, and I'm not denying that, and I'm agree with that, but the culture embedded and the practice is not the same, and there's a lot of things that we need to understand before attacking that. And I believe when UK started to go with the law priority, and I've been also part of the fact that we did the hospital reporting, so knowing the numbers, because we need to know numbers. Mm-hmm. But the way we have started, it was really like an attack and not like something like we want to understand, we want to help, and we want to support the prevention and the education. And I think we always really forgot about the health consequences. And that's the problem. And also the community, most of the community, they don't understand the link about the health implications they've got and the practice. So if they are not educated and they don't understand that, how they can understand that it's against the law, how they can understand it's not, it's harmful, how they can understand that I'm trying to do something for love for my child because I think my culture tell me that it's something that I do for love, and the UK government coming at me to do something I feel is part of protecting my child. So I think that's the way I've been honored to have a Mary Sickle Leadership Award in 2016, and I can assure you the community is really eager to have some help and support. I had men coming to my focus group crying because they didn't know how to sort it out, the situation, how to help their wives who are living with consequences that they feel like they can do anything about. So it's not they don't want help and they don't feel like it's important and it's useful to have the government implication, but it's just the way it's done. I think that's where it's a problem.
Thank you. David?
Just a very quick question, and thank you both for everything you shared so far. Within communities, does it tend to be the women that are pushing forward for their children to have FGM done, or is it the men, or is it just something that the community as a whole are almost accepting of, that this is the way things need to be done?
I think particularly is the female elderly women in the family, simply because they have gone through it. When I had the courage to talk to my grandmother about the suffering I had to go through for being mutilated, she turned around and looked at me and said she's very sorry, and that as far back as she could remember, every woman in the house had to go through that, so she didn't know any better. They don't know the dangers and the consequences of what they do. They just follow the culture and tradition. So it's mainly the female elderly women, the grandmothers, the aunties in the house that actually initiate this from my community.
Yeah. So, and I like that she said from my community, because we have to be really careful as well. As the FGM practice is different across the board of FGM practice. Not every community practice the same way. That's why we've got, first of all, 4 types of FGM. Mm-hmm. Not every community have the same, like some community is really taboo. And some community is like a party, it's like a rite of passage. It's different. It's not the same. So you have to be really careful, like when you're also generalizing like the practice. Some of places men are nowhere to be seen. They don't know what's happening. Some of them, they are really eager to have that to be implicated. In some community, as Valerie said, it's more the old generation. But again, it's really depending because, like in my community in Mali, when I did my midwifery degree, and I sat down with my biological father, and I told him like what's implication FGM done on me. He didn't know about it, but it was because he didn't want to know about it. Okay, so it's not because he was there, and it happened, he saw me after, but he didn't want to be implicated, so he left on the time. So we have to be really careful, but there's some other community. I had a surgery later in my age to have the reconstruction of the clitoris. When I did that, my biological brother came. He didn't, because I knew his mom is the one who brought me to do my FGM. I wanted to make sure, because he was married in France, if he got a little girl, that would not happen to her. He didn't want to talk about it. But they have the power. Men have the power behind. When I was doing my study with the Mary Sickle, men, they are aware, they've got the power, but they think it's a female problem. The female, they say, oh, we do that for the men. So it's very confusing. Nobody will take the ownership, but I think it's a global, again, problem. Everybody is involved with that, and we need to really not only involve female, because they've already been through it, they know about it, they know the consequences. Now we also need to involve men, because they cannot say, I'm not aware. They are aware. And we need to make sure they are part of the campaign as well, and they are part of the changes.
Thank you. Before I move on to the impact of FGM, I just wanted to talk a bit about the culture and also the cases that are happening in hospitals as well. So in terms of language, what would different communities call FGM? Because obviously it wouldn't be necessarily genital mutilation for them. What would they call it? What would they describe it as?
So, as a midwife, I'm not. It's very rare that I say female genital mutilation when I'm talking to the women, because they do not understand. They will understand cutting. Some of them are going to understand suna, pharaonic cutting. So they've got. I'm always adapting my language to the person I've got facing me. And sometimes I don't even use language. I use pictures. I use for them to understand, because that's really important. Sometimes, also, you have to know that because FGM is now done in such a broad range of age. In some country, like the country I'm from, Mali, now they're doing at 40 days of life. Who does remember at 40 days of life what happened to them? Nobody. So that's the thing. So we've got so much people, and I've got so much survivors who came to me who didn't know they had FGM prior to come to a FGM specialist clinic, because they see that in the media. That's where they learn that they've got FGM, because they didn't remember. Their body remember that something happened, but they don't remember that they had FGM. So therefore, it's really important to show pictures, because they can see the genitalia. They know that the genitalia doesn't look like the picture you just saw them. Yeah. So that's how I do. Yeah.
So when you're pregnant and you go into your first midwife's appointment, you get a checklist, and on there it says, "Have you had FGM?"
Yeah.
Would you say that is a suitable question to ask, or are we not going to catch everybody that has?
I believe it's not necessary. It's a suitable question if you are trained to ask the question, which most of the midwives are not trained to ask the question. They have been put this question in their list, their checklist, but they don't necessarily been trained, because in the hospital there is not the suitable training. They don't have the professional curiosity to train themselves on that one. There's a lot of medical terms that even educated women, they're not going to understand anyway, regardless if it's FGM or not FGM. So Furthermore, with FGM, we will need to maybe change the terminology. It can be something, but it doesn't matter the terminology. We have to ask the question. That's really important. Because sometimes we are brainy, very much we want to think about everything. It doesn't matter. If you keep FGM, but you know how to explain or how to show the image and how to, it doesn't matter if you say FGM. For me, it doesn't matter. What is matter is to ask the question to everyone, regardless their origin ethnic, regardless their skin tone. It's important to ask every woman through outdoors as maternity care in their booking appointment if they have undergone female genital mutilation, cutting, sooner. And also you adapt, because as I say, as midwife, we should adapt our language to the person we got in front of us.
Thank you. Valerie, I was a bit shocked when you said that there are examples of FGM being carried out in hospital situations. Does that mean that they're being carried out in other countries by medical professionals?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I want to come back to some of the things that Aissa said about pushing back with the culture, and Valerie, you said that your grandmother just didn't know any better. Surely medical professionals know better, or should know better? No?
They don't. Some of them do it for the profits.
They do it
They
for
get
the
paid.
profit.
Yeah, they get paid for doing it. And some of them think that doing it in the hospital makes it okay. It doesn't make it okay. It's still illegal. Children still die from that. Yeah.
So, can I add on on that one? That's shocking, but healthcare professionals in most of the country, UK included, they don't understand the impact of female genital mutilation. They do not. Again, when I did my dissertation in Mali, I went, and that's the prevalence, regardless what the number said, is not 82%, it's not 89%, it's 98%. Okay, that's the reality in Mali. What's happened? I've been to ministry, I've been to schools, I've been to hospitals. I was in a dispenser where there is a doctor who are treating day in, day out consequences of female genital mutilation. I interviewed 50 midwives in his dispenser, in the place he was working. They didn't have a clue about the consequences, the impact, the health impact on FGM and FGM. They didn't. Okay. And that wasn't, it's long ago, but it's not too long ago. It was 2009. So imagine in the country of where it's practicing, the practice is there, they don't understand the implication. How in the UK, where it's supposedly not practiced. So I think it's, again, that's why I'm saying education is the cornerstone of this campaign. Education is the most important thing. Health is the second most important thing. That's where we're going to prevent, and that's where we're going to change the attitude and the understanding, and we're going to link the problem to the action.
Thank you. Just a quick one on impact. What are the short and long-term impacts of FGM? We heard a lot from a survivor and the impact and long-term impact it had on the group of women, were young girls at the time, including the number of them that had died subsequently. Could you please just outline the impacts, short and long-term, of FGM, please? Valerie.
I would say FGM is a life sentence. It's been well over 40 years I was mutilated, but I still suffer. It leaves a long-lasting impact on you mentally. I still don't feel as if I'm a real woman. I still struggle with infections. I still have pains. So FGM is a terrible thing. It just doesn't go away. It takes away your confidence. It takes away your liberty. It makes me, every single day, I feel as if I did something wrong to deserve that. Yeah. So it has left me with physical pain, psychological pain, emotional trauma, and it's going to be with me for the rest of my life.
So FGM, the short-term, immediate consequences is death. We have to be clear about that. There is every day, I don't know how many numbers because I'm not a number person again, but one death is too many because of FGM. The other consequence, you've got affection, acute pain. You've got also just hemorrhage, like proper, complete hemorrhage, and that's where death is coming. Long-term consequences is psychological, is also physical, sexual, and also I think like we need to be really clear, like childbearing can be one of the dangerous time because of the practice of FGM. So I'm not talking about only type 3, because type 3, people see, it's the most horrific one because it's women are close up and they're not going to be able to have their child. But even a type 1 can make life-threatening situation for childbearing and childbirth. In terms of all survivors, they've got different story. They've got different health implication. We cannot say like one story, one survivor will suffer the same consequences. That's not true. We cannot, because we are all different. Even as a human, if you broke your leg, you're gonna heal differently. You're gonna walk differently because you are a different person. Okay, FGM is the same thing. FGM is the same thing. I had type 1 female genital mutilation at 6 years old. I'm 43 years old. I was discussing with Gillian before, and like few years ago, I was still wetting myself. I was incontinent because of FGM. I'm a midwife. I was working as a midwife, community midwife. Sometimes I had to go to the houses. I was blocking in traffic, and I was coming to houses. I was smelling pee and wet because I couldn't hold on to my urine. Having sex when you started to be a young girl, I want to have a partner, impossible. Because pain and fear of pain and fear of sex was something completely like covering me forever. I have now fight against all these consequences. But the psychology, I will be still, so I have had the reconstruction of clitoris, it was 20 years ago. I feel complete, I feel a female, I feel that, I've got the power that they took from me back, but I will still suffer from psychological fear of sex. I am still suffering for about sometimes nightmares, but not as much, obviously. But it is still there. It's still there, and it will be still there, and I will still feel like I've got a beautiful clitoris back. I will still feel like someone who had female genital mutilation.
Thank you for sharing and for being so open. That's incredibly powerful. And Valerie, we see beautiful, strong, wonderful women in front of us, very, very real women in front of us. So thank you. Samantha.
Thank you. To echo Chair Sarah's words, you are amazing. What you have been through and what you have done to become activists to support and fight against this horrific act is incredible. So on that topic, actually, I'd like for you both to be able to talk about your respective organisations. Aissa, you founded the Hope Clinic, and Valerie, Women of Grace UK. And I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how your respective organisations work to combat FGM and to support survivors.
So at Women of Grace, we offer our survivors care and support, just to help their health and well-being, to get them back into good shape so they can go back to their communities and impact them positively and raise a voice to put an end to female genital mutilation. We also collaborate with the local authorities to fight against female genital mutilation. We also train professionals. We go into schools We train the teachers age appropriately. We train the students as well. And we train NHS staff as well. We have a peer support group. We have also created a safe space where these women can come to regularly. And one of the unique things we do at Women of Grace is the survivors run a health and well-being class where they make the tea and coffee, and the other bit of the community comes in, not just to buy the tea and coffee, but to have a chance to talk to the survivor, to give the survivor a voice, and then raising awareness, because it's very important for us to raise awareness. When I started my advocacy, one of the things I was told is, this is not the kind of thing we want to discuss here. It only happens in Africa. So that's just pure ignorance. And we have seen that where we are based with predominantly white people in the area, they have now come to understand what female genital mutilation is just by communicating with the survivors during the health and well-being classes. Yeah.
Thank you.
So the story of FGM Hope Clinic started because I'm a midwife and because I've seen day in and day out the care in maternity for female genital mutilation survivors. And for me, it was unacceptable. I've been lucky enough to meet people like Fyle, like Comfort Momo, Juliet Albert, who also Equalities, who passed away, and forward. And for me, like what I was seeing them doing, that's what I wanted doing, but because I've got this survivor also side of my story, for me, it was really important to be implicated. So I was at the time in a hospital, so I did everything by the book to get these services going on in my local hospital. Unfortunately, due to budget, and when I was doing my clinic, so I did, when I opened the clinic, so I was doing defibrillation because that was the real important part in our maternity care. So defibrillation, and as well as birth plan, because, there's so many professionals who are not aware what is FGM. So many midwives and gynecologists who don't know what is FGM, and when they treat a survivor, is sometimes the shock in their face or the way they treat the woman make them more victim than anything else. So I wanted to make sure that there is a birth plan for each and every one that of the women who are there. Then it was coffee morning, because education and prevention is the most important thing as well. And this coffee morning, I was baking my own cake in the Saturday, doing that on my own time because NHS wasn't providing me time to do that. But it doesn't matter because the important is the survivors. And unfortunately, the maternity, due to political and financial restructuration, closed. Therefore, nobody will be helping this woman. Nobody will be. So I decided, with my broken English, to go to policy, and I'm not a politician at all, but decided to fight for the FGM Hope Clinic to become a charity, which he did in 2016. Obviously, I could not do the clinical part anymore because I didn't have a clinical setting anymore. But I was really, for me, it's really important to signpost the women who are coming to me to professionals, to FGM clinical services who are the best of the best and who can support. But sometimes they have to go to Birmingham, they have to go to London, they're not necessarily, because I've got people from all over the UK. It's not only a London problem, it's a UK-wide problem. And also because I'm kind of known by my network as the one who had the reconstruction of the clitoris, the one who's got one step forward. I've got more women coming to me in the past years, I must be honest, who come not for the clinical things because they can find it anywhere else, but they really come for the fact I have been going through this surgery 20 years ago. I was one of the 601st and in the ward. And so they come to me and they want this support. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to help them, to support them in the UK. And because I'm French and I've also trained in Belgium, I have to help them to go abroad to have the surgery. I have to help them. So it's my family and my network and my friends who are, it's very organic. We support them because we don't want them to be on their own in a country with, it's not the language, it's a very time where they're very vulnerable as well. So my family and my friends, they host them. They go with them to the appointment. And also, if I can, I take some day off. I take some time off to go if I can go. We have no financial support at all because I don't know how to sell as good as Valerie, but we don't have financial support, but it doesn't matter because it's one girl at a time. So I'm very proud to say I've got more than 20 girls who've been at the surgery throughout the years, and that changed their life forever. And I'm just carry on until UK, and hopefully Juliet, we're going to talk later, but until the UK decides that's also their business to work with this survivor, because there's a demand. There's really a demand, and we need to stop being deaf, and we need to listen to this demand. And I don't think, I wish FGM Hope Clinic doesn't exist, because that means all the women and girls who want to have the reconstructive surgery can have it in the UK, and I don't need to do it anymore.
Okay. Thank you so much. One of the things I think that's come over loud and clear in the things that you've been saying, and you said it explicitly before we came to my question, is around education and healthcare being absolutely key around supporting survivors from a healthcare perspective, but also on the education piece, raising awareness and changing perceptions. Is there any, what's the most effective way to persuade family members and communities not to undertake FGM? So I know you've mentioned the awareness thing, but do men and women have different roles in playing in preventing it?
So for me, again, I don't know if I cannot talk for all the FGM community, but you have to identify what's the dynamic, the cultural dynamic. You have to identify who are the decision maker in the family. You have to understand, is it the grandmother? Is it the father? Is it who is the decision maker in the family? And you have to. And for me also, it's not about trying to persuade them. It's just showing facts. Who can deny that when a girl have FGM, one of the consequences is fistula? Who can deny that? Since from 6 years old to my 38 years old, I was incontinent. Who can deny that? Nobody can deny that. So it's facts showing but it's going to be a long journey, a long process. It's not going to be just, we do one talk and we say one time, and yes, that's fine, we're going to have a solution on FGM. It's going consistency, persistency, and non-judgmental as well. We are not here to judge the practice. We know it's bad. Thank you. We've already said that several times. But now, what can we do for the practice to stop? Is to understand the culture, understand the people who are practicing the culture, and finding the way to, without judging them and without them feeling judged, finding the way to educate them and for them to find their own voice and say, okay, yes, I am against FGM.
So I think for us, it's just engaging as well the religious leaders, the people who make the decision. Every culture is different, but knowing that you're working with them, you will be able to have access to the women. And because in some of the cultures, the women sort of respect their religious leaders, the people who make decisions over them. And when say, for example, one of the communities we are working with now, we had to go through the imams. We spoke to them, raised their awareness, they understood. Then they came with us into the activities. So the women seeing their decision makers in the room with us, knowing that we're all together, that raised a lot of awareness and understanding, and that gave us even more access to get into the communities.
That's really interesting. I was going to say, once you've said it's not about religion, it is about stakeholders, whether that is a religious leader that people look to for guidance, or whether it's a grandma in the family.
And also, I think we also need to focus on the educating the women, because the women, they already know. They already know they are in pain. They already know they've got consequences they suffer. The education is the broader family, is the broader community, because sometimes the women, they've got pressure. And this pressure, even though they don't want for their little girl to go through FGM, they're going to have to go because the pressure of the community. And they might be strong at the beginning for years and years, and so at one point they can give up because we are not supporting them with convincing and educating the people who are pressuring her.
Okay, thank you. I'm so mindful of time, and I could honestly sit and listen to you for ages. Just quickly, in like 30 seconds each, if that's okay. Sorry about this. With the time constraint, not about the question. If there's anything you could ask central government to do, what would it be? 30 seconds, I know that's pretty hard. How can we support you?
Tougher monitoring, especially at the UK borders, because I've had the opportunity of working with the police, the border force, and we had to go to the airport to talk to clients going out to and from the prevalent areas, and that was very effective. And also maybe funding the grassroots organizations. These are people who have the first hand working in the community. They need fund to be able to raise better services for the survivors.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I agree with Valerie for these ones, and I would add on you have to involve education. So education that's good be in schools, that from primary school to doctors' school, it's all the schools. I think the funding is really important. Of the clinical settings of GM specialist clinic need some funding, need some support to do the good work and carry on the good work they're doing. And also we have to open the door to other things, because women they are asking more than just education, prevention, care of the consequences. They want the next step as well. So I'm talking about reconstruction of the clitoris, thinking about that, because women, they are desperate for that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know that we've been tight for time, so if there is anything that you think actually you could have expanded on or you wanted to, please do write in, and we can have that as written evidence. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Really grateful. Thank you.
Snip to the...
Yes. Thank you. This is panel number 2. Thank you very much for joining us. We've got Janet Fyle, MBE, Professional Policy Advisor at the Royal College of Midwives. We've got Juliet Albert, Specialist FGM Midwife at Imperial College, and Professor Hassan, Senior and Global Health Vice President at Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists. Welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining us. And Christine.
Thank you. Yes, Christine Jordan's my name. I wondered if I could ask you all, What, in your experience, are the most significant and most frequent health complications for women and girls who've experienced FGM that you've come across?
I'll answer that. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think, as we mentioned earlier, I think there are, I would classify them into kind of 4 categories. So there are physical complications, obstetric complications, sexual complications, and psychological complications. And there are short-term and long-term complications. If we start with the physical complications, obviously the physical mutilation, that could be the need for these young girls eventually later in life may needing to have more surgery at the time of this reconstructive surgery, at the time of the procedure, the risk of bleeding, infection, and long-term problems like urinary tract infections and other complications, which may also lead to fertility problems later in life, and so on. Obstetric complications is a major concern because there is recent data to show that at the moment there are 230 million women and girls who've undergone FGM. 30 million over the next 4 years are expected to undergo FGM, and 44,000 women die because of FGM every year. That means one woman dying every 12 minutes. So by the time we finish this session, there will be at least probably 6 women who have died by the time we finish this session. The psychological support, I couldn't really describe better than what was said today. The low self-esteem, the depression, the anxiety, that all the problems that comes with it. And then the sexual problems, that's from lack of desire to the fear of having sex. And that comes with all types, actually, because I've recently visited Malaysia, and I was really kind of shocked to see actually open advertisement in Malaysia for babies at the age of 6 months undergoing FGM. And the idea here that they do pricking of the clitoris with a small needle. It's like more like a cultural tradition. But what happens is some studies have shown that because the clitoris is so small, despite the needle being small, that causes nerve damage. And later in life, of course, that would be disfigurement and all the complications that comes with it. So whatever type, I agree with previous speakers here today, that they all lead to serious complications, short-term and long-term, is barbaric. And medicalization, which you mentioned earlier, is a major problem, particularly for me. So I come originally from Sudan and Egypt. And these 2 countries, unfortunately, they're not just bound by the River Nile, they're bound by this horrible procedure that they do. Sudan in particular, the type 3. And medicalization in these 2 countries, which means procedures done by healthcare workers, is as high as 80%. The most recent report says is 64% are done by healthcare workers. In Egypt in particular, done by doctors. And one of the things that I have developed with the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists is to reduce medicalization, because if you look at the most recent report on SDGs, it is very clearly trying to identify reducing medicalization. And medicalization sometimes gives that kind of confidence or false reassurance to patients that doing it in a clinic, and that means it's safe. But what it leads, actually, it leads to having more people having it done because they think it's done in a clinic. And that's a major concern. And unfortunately, doctors are doing it, midwives are doing it, traditional birth attendants are doing it, and it is not related to religion, because we see a very high prevalence of FGM in Sierra Leone. It's not always related to the Islamic religion. So serious complications and millions of women, and I think we need to address that very quickly. And in my opinion, we need to, I know this is about the UK, but I feel that I'm quite disappointed, if I'm going to be honest, by the reducing the global funding, because that will lead to less effective research, because we need to stop this problem at its source, and we need to really work hard with other organizations to try to stop it at source. And I think that's what we need to do, personally.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything, either of you want to add anything to that, about other significant health problems that you may have come across? Or?
I think Hassan has articulated it very well, thank you.
I just wanted to add that there are a lot of women with type 3 FGM who are coming for deinfibulation, the opening procedure, and we've done over 1,000 women in the last 15 years, so they're having it done often under local anaesthetic, but there are some clinics in the UK where they don't have access to defibrillation under local anaesthetic, and women are having to go on long gynae theatre waiting lists to have defibrillation under general anaesthetic. So we see a lot of that, and we see, as Hassan was saying, a lot of women with type 1 and type 2 as well, who are still suffering a lot with pain and other problems with urinary incontinence and the psychological impacts.
I mean,
is there specific other... Sorry.
I was just going to say, talking about the psychological impact, one of the things that stick with me is that for some of the survivors of FGM, the psychological impact is equivalent at times to soldiers who have seen action on the battlefield. So if you could contextualize that, then we'll see where these women are coming from and how much help we need to give to them.
On that point, is there specific support, medical and health services you feel should be provided for women and girls with FGM?
Right, so I was going to start off by saying to you, I would answer all your questions, but you need to bear in mind that I come here with one objective: to get across to you that survivors of FGM are being neglected and that we need a proper service, not pilots that will end, and that when we talk about counsellors, we need someone who's an expert in counselling women who have had FGM. I'll just take you back a little bit. In 2015, some of the individuals here, the Royal College of Obstetricians and GPs, we came together and I led a multi-intercollegiate group, and we did a recommendation, 8 recommendations, and the government responded well. And Britain is leading, actually, however we look at it, however much we complain, we're leading in this area. And one of the recommendations was that FGM is considered as child abuse, which the UN adopted from us. But we've gone down so much that we've let the women down. And this is the Women and Equalities Commission. And for as much as I'm going to answer all your questions, I want you to think about a basic service for these women. And that is a safe space where they could talk to clinicians about the condition they find themselves in, expert support from a psychologist who understands how to counsel women for FGM, and also not to forget that as much as we focus on non-pregnant women, and maternity has done extremely well in terms of identifying women antenatally and during birth and can offer defibrillation, but we need to think about women on the other side of the scale, menopausal women. Could you just, for 1 second, think about what I'm going to say to you? There's a woman sitting in her living room. She's had children. They've been to university and they've gone to work. They've gone half their career. She's alone. Her husband has found a younger woman, and she's all alone at home. She's got urinary tract infection. She's got repeated infection. She's depressed. She's got pain. She doesn't know what to do. She's all alone, and we don't do anything to help her. One of the clinics, when the NHS reviewed one of the pilot clinics, they came back to say the NHS had a net benefit of £200,000 by providing this basic service to women. So I will answer your question, but I'm going to keep on that you keep in mind that you'll be doing something around inequalities, because this is a women and equalities community. Thank you.
Can I say something about there are 28 specialist clinics across the UK, so there's no clinic in Northern Ireland. We had a woman travel to our London clinic from Northern Ireland. She was told she had to wait 3 years on a gynae waiting list to be seen because there was nobody to defibrillate her there. There's one clinic in Wales, one clinic in Scotland. So clinics, the services are very variable. Sometimes women are having to travel very long distances. We know that non-pregnant women sometimes have to go to a clinic that's situated in a maternity setting, where obviously it's very difficult. If they get noticed, they might get seen. If they're not married, they're assuming that they're pregnant. But actually, they're not pregnant, but they're just trying to access a specialist clinic. So we have to just be aware that things like self-referral, no geographical boundaries, fast-track walk-in services are really, really important for FGM survivors because there are so many barriers for them in accessing specialist care. And a lot of women, they don't even know that their problems are because of FGM. So if the GP and the primary care staff, they really need educating so that they're able to say, yes, this is what I think you've got, and therefore you need to go to a specialist service.
Thank you. Can we just have to... So some of the answers that you come up with hopefully will be in some of the other sections as well. We've got health services, we've got reconstructive surgery, and we've got the effect of FGM on pregnancy and childbirth as well. Kira?
Yeah, I think you've already answered some of my questions, so thank you. And thank you for sharing your experiences with us today. In your view, we're talking a lot around women's health hubs, so I wanted to know what you think the role is of women's health hubs in helping FGM survivors, or what role they can play.
Actually, I can start with that. So I feel there is an opportunity for us with the women's health hubs. Because the idea here that we're going to have these specialist hubs which looks after women, and I think if we have the appropriate trained accredited personnel, I think it would be a good accessibility for survivors of FGM. The concern I have at the moment with the women's health hubs is that it seems to be going to be the solution for a lot of things. Yeah. And my concern at the moment that they don't seem to be any kind of secured central funding. The issues we have, I come from Southwest London, for example, ICB, and they've been asked to reduce their budget by 30%. So I'm not really sure how we're going to fit all these things. I think in principle, it sounds like a great idea because that's where you got a meeting of primary care and secondary care in the community nearer to the clients, and I think that makes sense. But we need to ensure that the people who are there are going to be well-trained, psychological training, asking the right question, and know how to deal with that. Now, one of the biggest problems we face in the country at the moment is I find, is language barriers. Coming back earlier to the question we asked about what does FGM means in different languages. For example, in Sudan and Egypt, they call it Tuhara. Tuhara means purification. So the name itself is awful. Yeah. So for me, I think what we need to go back is that how do we allow the language barriers? At the moment, there is no standards in the UK for language barriers. The Embrace report shows most of the women who die have problems with language barriers. So if you don't speak English, 25 more times likely to die. And at the moment, we don't have any standards. If you look at the recent kind of information sent for people to bid for interpretation services, it's very basic. NVQ level 3, you can do the service. So there's a lot of work we need to do. So yes, I think it will have a role, but we need to do it properly. We can't just say women's health hubs, but no funding to follow.
Thank you. And Janet, did you want to add anything else? Or?
Yes, I mean, in principle, Women's Health Hub is the place to be, because if we could contextualize FGM within women's health and well-being, then perhaps we might make progress. But at the moment, FGM is commissioned by the Integrated Care Boards, the ICBs, and at the same time, the ICBs commission pelvic health services. So you have survivors of FGM and women who have had birth trauma vying for the same resources. And I suppose maybe moving forward, what we need to think about is leadership and accountability. Because if the ICBs are funded to provide the services, the structures within the NHS currently must be used to get them to account for what they're doing and not putting the money to cover a deficit, but to put the money towards providing services for women.
Juliet?
I think that women's health hubs are so important, particularly for areas of low prevalence of FGM, where there isn't going to be a standalone specialist FGM clinic, and those women then will be able to access the women's health hubs. I just want to add, though, that psychosexual counselling is really important, as well as trauma counselling, and it's not good enough just having a counsellor. They have to have FGM training, because you hear stories of women going to see a counsellor and the counsellor ends up crying because the counsellor knows nothing about FGM. So we need to make sure these are expert counsellors who have had FGM training, and health advocates who the women can identify with, then they can translate as well. So you're absolutely right, Hassan, the translation language is really important too.
Just on that, you mentioned specialist FGM support services. Would that be a preferred method of support over a women's health hub, or do you think there's some other solution there that might be worth it? And that's open to the whole panel, by the way.
I mean, I think we have to be realistic. As I said, in areas of low prevalence, perhaps it's not realistic to suggest. What we can't have is like I said, non-pregnant women having to go to a maternity setting always. So I don't know if Hassan, you've got other ideas about that.
I mean, I think I agree with you. I think in high prevalence areas, like London, for example, we need to have the specialist centres, but in low prevalence areas, I think it would be reasonable to kind of have something in the women's health hubs, but with expertise. I think the most important thing is that the training packages, at the moment we have a lot of training packages that, RCM, RCOG, we've done through the NHS. They're not mandatory, they're now 10 years old. So we need to really see how we can educate, and the psychosexual training is really crucial because it's completely different kind of how you counsel these women. So I think they will have a role in low prevalence areas. I agree with Juliet in that.
But also in low prevalence areas, if the women turn up at a women's health hub or health hub, there must be a pathway for the individuals working within those women's health hub to say, right, we don't have those services here, but this is what I must do. I refer you to this person. And as I said earlier on, if you have a multidisciplinary team within those hubs, they have an idea what to do when someone turns up in an area where there's not an established service.
I just wanted to add one thing here as well. We're talking about accessibility, but one of the major problems that sometimes these women face is actually the fear of actually seeking accessibility. Number one, because of stigma. Number two, because this perceived charging, because at the moment asylum seekers and people who are not really, we know FGM is FGM is excluded from charging, but people don't know that. And I think, for me that was a very negative move that happened on the NHS when that charging came in, and I'm hoping that the new government will reverse that because I think that a lot of women have a fear of accessing care because they're worried that they charge. Imagine somebody who doesn't speak English, doesn't know the details. It is very difficult. I have it in my own hospital sometimes where our charging people will come and try to charge patients because they don't understand the law very well. And that's well-educated people who speak English as the first language, let alone somebody who's an asylum seeker. And also that people need to be culturally sensitive. Do we know how to deal with them? And on the negative side, sometimes when people find they have FGM, they focus on that and forget about everything else for what they came for.
Thank you very much. I think that's everything for me.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a quick question before I hand over to Christine. Professor Hassan, did you just say that the training package for FGM is 10 years old?
Yes.
Would you say that it's time for a refresh, a review and an update?
Yes. I can say that before we came here, we spoke to the communities, we spoke to colleagues who work at the NHS, and I could say that the e-learning package is up for review and to update. So I've been told that's going to happen.
So from the RCOG, we have something called the Green Top Guideline, and that was... so we're now actually looking for new developers to do that, and normally we work together with the RCM and the RCGP. So I think if we get support as well, that would be good because that's the way to do it properly.
I think the point is it's still not mandatory for healthcare professionals, and it needs to be. I mean, we've been talking about this for how long, and it's still not mandatory. It seems ridiculous.
Is it not mandatory for midwives?
It's not mandatory, so it has been included in some of the training packages now, but it's not mandatory, no.
It's not mandatory. I know people ask about midwives because most of the development, maternity has done very well and are aware around FGM in the last 10 years. But the Royal College of Midwives does push that every midwife should undertake the training. And I know we talk about training, but there are other aspects of training, bias training, the nuances, professional curiosity, how to ask questions around FGM. It's not just your standard training. There's something that has to be skills-based with all the packages that are around there. It must be implemented where people are working so that they see live examples of how to talk to women about FGM.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a quick question from Samantha about ICBs, and then I'm going to hand over.
Oh, thank you so much. So if you see us looking at our phones, it's normally so we can just say, can you make sure you ask that? So we're trying to be effective. We're not being rude. Quick question though. As MPs, we get to regularly meet with ICB chief execs, NHS chief execs, health watches. What's the best way? So I'm a Derbyshire MP, predominantly white Caucasian county, but Derby City is pretty ethnically diverse. But from an awareness perspective, Caucasian white British people need to understand. And so, what is the best question I can ask of the ICB chair of the CEO of the NHS Trust and Health Watch to establish what they're doing right now, and if they're doing nothing, who I can point them in the direction to find out best practice, and then hold them accountable so that the next meeting I can say, and what have you done about FGM?
Okay, I will answer that. I think we need clear leadership and priorities of the ICBs, because they have been given the money for pelvic health, and within that's where they've placed FGM.
Okay.
So it's about how much money they've put into the FGM services, and it's not just a counsellor, it's an expert counsellor, and in many places, it's the midwives who undertake most of the work around FGM in terms of defibrillation. But I think you should ask that question about whether they've got a multidisciplinary team and how it works within their ICB and how accountable they are.
Okay. And if the answer is all quite low, who can we point them in? And this might be a follow-up question that you can share information with us. But personally, as a Member of Parliament, I would like to leverage this opportunity to start those engagements with my local key people. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine.
Hi, let me get, yes. We've heard mentioned several times reconstructive surgery, but I wonder if you could tell us whether you think or how successful it is in terms of physical and mental well-being of the women who have reconstructive surgery in comparison to those who don't.
I mean, reconstruction surgery has been available since 1998 in France. Over 6,000 women in France have had reconstruction surgery, and actually it's available in so many different countries in Europe. So, Belgium, France, Switzerland, Spain, Italy, Netherlands. So there is actually quite a lot of evidence, and we did a scoping review in 2024, and we found that in 94% of cases there was some improvement. Complication rate was only 3%, so this is not life-threatening surgery. This is not expensive surgery. It can be done as day case surgery. And a lot of women, so women are seeking reconstruction surgery for three main reasons. The first reason would be for long-term genital pain. The second reason would be sexual dysfunction or lack of sexual pleasure. And the third reason is for what we call body dysmorphia, so not feeling whole or not feeling complete. So, the evidence shows that for a lot of women, it's extremely beneficial. It's not for every woman. Not everyone needs or wants reconstruction surgery. But I think we feel really, really strongly that it's something that should be available in the UK. We've got the expertise in the UK. We have vulval reconstruction surgery for cancer patients. We do gender reassignment surgery, feminizing surgery. So we've got the technique, we've got the expertise, and what we're pushing for is for there to be a clinical trial so that we contribute to the evidence, because the WHO specifically said in 2016 we need more evidence, and yet the UK is not contributing to this, which I think is really shameful. When I did a survey of service leads across the UK, and unanimously they all agreed that reconstruction surgery should be available. And in terms of numbers, 90 women within 1 year had attended FGM specialist services requesting reconstruction surgery. So we know that there are women that want it. Not everyone, but there are a number of women in the UK that want access to this, and sometimes they are travelling abroad, like Aissa said. And, you know, surgical tourism, we know that that's expensive and costly on the NHS if they come back with problems. So really, yeah, I mean, we feel it's completely unacceptable, and we have applied for some funding from the NIHR to conduct a clinical trial, which we'll find out in a few months. But I think that it's really important that we have services in this country. We need at least a centre of excellence in London and then another one in Manchester or Birmingham, so that women don't have to travel too far. And we really, really want trauma and psychosexual therapy embedded as part of the service, so that, because we know that some women after trauma and psychosexual therapy, they may decide they no longer want reconstruction surgery, so we want that to be integrated into the service.
So would it be fair... Sorry, carry on.
Juliet knows this, so I have, as a Royal College, we have a slightly different view. I think that's really quite important. So actually, we welcome research into reconstructive surgery. I think at the moment we've reported back queries from the government several times as an RCOG that the evidence at the moment is still really not enough for us to have NHS centres for reconstructive surgery. I welcome the work that Juliet is doing, because she's really, really doing a lot of good work in research, and we support research. But at the moment, the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists does not support having NHS centres for reconstructive surgery until we're better informed. At the moment, I don't think the evidence is there.
But how do we get better informed unless we do research?
So that's why we report. Yeah. I think we support research rather than reconstructive surgery centres. I think that's the difference in that.
So would it be fair to say that there is a difference of opinion, or there are two different streams of thought? One, that there is evidence there to show that reconstructive surgery is hugely beneficial, and therefore it should be widely available in this country, and presumably on the NHS. It should be available as a service. But at the same time, the Royal College of Obstetricians does not feel that there is
no evidence at the moment. I think the evidence is levels. There is level A, B, C. So the best quality of evidence when you have a certain level of research that people do. And I think the RCOG is we've always put ourselves at a very high level of evidence-based practice. That's what we produce. And at the moment, our evidence-based practice does not favour reconstructive surgery, and we're very clear about that. I think we need more research into it.
I think we're all saying the same things here.
Yes.
That we have to do a trial to see whether it works, and that is going to be underway soon. I'll let Juliet speak to that. And I don't think we're saying not the same thing, because in the UK health services, you need to demonstrate through evidence that something is effective for the state to fund it, for it to happen.
You think that the trial would provide, so you're all agreed that what we need, perhaps in the first instance, is a trial?
Support the trial, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Okay.
Iris.
Thank you, Chair. We've touched on this a little already, but what effect do you think FGM has on pregnancy and childbirth, and how do you think the NHS supports a woman who has undergone FGM, particularly type 3 FGM as well, if she becomes pregnant?
So as an obstetrician, I can do that, or what do you want to do from a midwifery point of view? I think there are two possible ways of looking at this. So we look at it from the UK point of view. If things are followed properly, then we do the defibrillation earlier on, and with that, we try to avoid complications that may arise if somebody just arrives with kind of birthing stage. Because of the scar tissue, there are complications such as immediately, mainly bleeding at the time of giving birth. Also complications of nerve damage, complications of infections, especially after delivery as well. So lots of complications. Overseas, then the problems are even worse, because people don't get the infibulation and they end up with obstetric labor, and that lead to obstetric fistula, all the other complications, death of the baby, death of the mother, hemorrhage, infection. So it's absolutely horrific when you look at what happens in Africa and in Asia where it's done. In the UK, as much as possible, if the woman is seen in the right centre with the right pathway, I think things are probably done in a reasonable way, but still there are much more complications that arise after delivery.
Yeah. Juliet.
I was just going to say that, we have 25 specialist services and there are 215 trusts. So not every maternity services has an FGM specialist or an FGM champion. And there really needs to be an FGM specialist who can diagnose what type of FGM she has. We need obviously better training, so at booking they're asked, when they're asked the question, the women understand the question and they've got translators and counsellors. I was thinking about Derbyshire and in Sheffield, for example, if a pregnant woman with type 3 FGM, they don't seem to be able to offer defibrillation during pregnancy. They have to wait until labour. It's completely unacceptable. So in some places, there's different practice going on, and it's very variable. It is very patchy.
Yeah. Thank you. And we've spoken about type 3, but I know I'm conscious that Aissa mentioned earlier that it's not just type 3 FGM that is affected. Would you be able to just touch on the other types of FGM as well?
I mean, for me, my concern mainly with type 1 and 2 is, first of all, they get ignored because people don't think they're serious enough. But also, I am worried about the gap we have with regard to how we identify young girls under the age of 18. Who assesses them? How do we assess them? Are the pediatricians the right people? Do we have FGM experts, obstetricians, midwives? And how do you go about it actually to examine a child under 18, especially when they have complications as well? So we have a big gap in our services at the moment and understanding the implications. I don't know what you think.
I mean, UCLH have a brilliant clinic for paediatric clinic, and there are some other clinics they now actually link up with satellite centres, so there are some paediatric experts, but again it's a bit patchy. And I think the other thing just to say is during pregnancy we know that women with all types of FGM, they're more likely to bleed during labour, they're more likely to tear, have longer maternal stay, they have flashbacks sometimes during labour or during suturing afterwards. So actually, there's also we haven't discussed the intersectional violence that often is alongside FGM, and I'd say over 30% of the women we see, there's other intersectional violence that they've suffered. So sometimes it might be fleeing from war, rape, domestic violence, early forced marriage, juju, witchcraft. So it's really, really common. So they're quite complex cases, the women that we see in maternity services.
Even vaginal examination is difficult sometimes because of the trauma and the flashbacks they have.
And sometimes we need to understand also the family dynamics of FGM and the community dynamics of FGM. And when you were talking about types of FGM, there's a problem with type 4 FGM at the moment, which goes one way or the other. It depends on which church you come in front of, I guess. I'm sure the police will tell you. But those of us with young friends and kids who do TikTok, we need to be aware that they are boys. There's a lot of misogyny around FGM. We need to be aware that boys are going on TikTok talking about, my girlfriend has to do a little bit of stuff under there so that she's neat and tidy. And the girls themselves say, we go to our GP, and the GP, my colleague was telling me, my GP, I just fake it to my GP that, I can't bear to look at myself, and I've got mental health problems, I'm going to kill myself. So the GP refers to a psychologist who says, yes, you go to the NHS and you get some form of reconstruction done to your vulva. So we need to be really aware of the way that communities, and especially young men, are interpreting what women and girls should do, and it's playing into the FGM scenario as well.
I just wanted to add something actually from David's questions earlier about is it the women or the men, and actually links to this question as well. There was an article in 24th of November in The Guardian last year when it showed that FGM has increased in Chad when Sudanese women and families went to Chad because of the war. And that increased both among the Sudanese women and girls, even post-marital, as well as Chad women and girls. And it made me think about that because going back, there's probably not a lot of men because of the war that there. But is it really kind of conducted or kind of led by the women? But actually made me think and discuss with other people. And I think the reality is it is ingrained in society. Yeah. I still think it's men trying to control women, although they're not directly involved. Yeah. But actually this is what expected from the elders to do for their girls. Yeah. I think that's probably, and it's really interesting. So with all the war and all the problems that are happening, people are still thinking by this so-called purification, doing that procedure. In refugee camps, during war, and where people are hungry, they leave everything and they're doing that. And that really tells you how ingrained that problem is that we have to remove. And therefore, culture is an issue, society is an issue, and unfortunately, some of these people bring that culture and society with them, even when they go to the Western world.
Yeah. Can I just say, I think positive vulval messaging is really important. But the other thing we haven't talked about is house services. This is such an important point of contact that if we make this with a woman, so we should be thinking about supporting them with English classes, helping them with housing. If they're asylum seekers, that we support them. I think that funding for charities and grassroots organisations is really, really important, that we're working with them.
Thank you. And just quickly, I think you've answered this already, but do you think the NHS is capable of helping women who have undergone FGM during pregnancy and childbirth? So, for example, does it provide the right training to midwives?
Very patchy, I would say.
Yeah, very patchy. I think the NHS could, if it has good leadership in that area, a commitment and a multidisciplinary approach to dealing with and supporting women and girls who've undergone FGM. I think they're capable of doing that. But I think FGM is siloed in many places. And provision is patchy and people are not taking it seriously. In areas where you have a good service, it's in areas where the clinicians and the local communities are committed to doing well for the women. So this brings me to my little list, because I think you're about to finish. Can I go through my little list? Okay. It's that my ask today is for FGM services within women's health hubs or wherever it is to be funded. It should be consistent with clear specification, protocols and guidance, and clear referral pathways across all entities where FGM services are provided. And it should include psychological therapy by an expert counsellor, language support and health advocate, and it should take a multidisciplinary approach, and it should have a good leadership. Training for healthcare professionals, not only the e-learning, but it's about how curious they are, how they ask the questions around FGM. And the one thing that we haven't done since 2014 is a prevalence study. We don't know what the prevalence of FGM is in the United Kingdom. And if you take England and London, for example, there's a particular borough that has the highest prevalence of FGM in the whole of the country, in Southwark. So we need an immediate prevalence study and education and awareness within communities. We've got to where we've gotten to because we worked with the communities. They were the ones who raised awareness around FGM, in tackling FGM. And when we were speaking to them, they said, oh, don't worry, the government has forgotten about FGM. It's finished, they've done their bit and they're done. And I think we need to reignite the confidence that the communities had in us. FCDO must improve its funding globally to reduce FGM. It is an imported problem, and we have to stop it at force. Yeah. And finally, we signed up to SDG 5. 2030 is just round the corner. The government needs to begin to look at what it has done and how it's going to report and engage with the experts and the people who have been working in this. Because all the initiatives and all the good work we've done, people overseas, other countries are adopting what we've done, because we've been the leaders. We were the ones who took this on. And I think we need to reconnect with the communities, fund the organizations that are working tirelessly, and never forget the survivors. And I've left you with that picture of the older woman. It's not just the pregnant woman or non-pregnant woman, it's the woman in her menopausal years. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before we move on, Janet, you just talked about confidence in the community. We're about to speak to the police and how child protection works and the police in their role in FGM. Is there a tension between securing confidence from the community and getting the women the treatment that they need alongside the police work around prosecutions? Is there a tension? Is there one that should take priority over the other, or can they both work together?
I don't think so, because we continue to work very collaboratively with the police. We tell them truths when there's truth to be told. We work hand in hand with them. But what has happened is that this, FGM has taken a back seat. And I suppose if there's any tension, I wouldn't like to blame them, because they're suffering from the same issues around funding. But I think that needs to be looked at, because we had, I will call it our halcyon days, when the police, social services, health, education work together. And we should not forget that education piece.
And it's a difficult job they face, to be honest. I mean, our experience has been very good working with the police in this, and it's a difficult job, and it's complex.
My question isn't about how well you work together. My question is, if a woman comes forward and it's her auntie, her grandma, her mother that has inflicted FGM on her, what confidence does that community have that you are just going to treat her rather than end up prosecuting and being part of that prosecution? Is there a tension between those two things? Is that a barrier for a lot of women coming forward?
Previously, perhaps, not now, because in the last couple of cases, the police were really kind of on it, and that they were going to prosecute, and they did. I don't know of any other. Of course, we could say that we can train the new recruits a little bit more in terms of just rushing in and say, because you've had FGM, you're going to do it on your child. So it's something around training and understanding of how this plays out in the community and within health as well.
Thank you so much, Juliet, Janet, and Professor Hassan.
Thank you.
Professor Hassan, I know I had some questions around the international part of it. Are we okay to do those in writing?
Yes.
Thank you very, very much, all three of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
God, I can see my mad hair in that. Thank you. Hi, Danny.
NSPCC not here? NSPCC help? Oh, okay. That's all right. Oh.
Yes. No, I didn't realise Grainne wasn't here.
Thank you very much. And I know you've been listening to the other two panels, so you know how this works. If there's anything that you want to follow up in greater detail, or you think actually you want to go into greater detail but time's not going to allow, please follow up in writing. Grainne, can you hear us?
I can hear you clearly.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Welcome to the committee. So Grainne is from FGM Helpline. She's the Helpline Practice Manager at NSPCC. Down the line, welcome, thank you. Got Gillian Squires, MBE, Director of Honomy Limited and retired Detective Constable at West Midlands Police. And we have Detective Chief Superintendent Angela Craggs, Deputy National Lead for Harmful Practice and National Police Chiefs Council for the NPCC. Welcome to you all. Thank you very much for joining us. And I am going to hand over to David first.
Thank you very much, and thank you again, all three of you, for being here today. I just want to start by listening to you guys and hearing what you think the scale of the challenge with FGM is here in the UK. And perhaps we'll go to you first, Grainne, down the line, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for inviting us to be part of the conversation today. We're really delighted to be here, so it's great to be here. In terms of the scale of FGM, it's really, really difficult to quantify due to the hidden nature of it. Like all forms of abuse, there's a lack of precise data showing its prevalence. It is estimated, however, that 170,000 women and girls are affected by FGM in England and Wales. But as with everything, it may not be a true reflection of the scale of the problem because there's so much silence around this issue. It's estimated that around 65,000 girls aged 13 and younger are at risk currently of FGM, but like many forms of abuse, it is hidden. We know that it's a very complex issue, it's a very intersectional issue, and it's very, very difficult to get to the core of how we address this and how we engage with those communities. We know there's a sense of loyalty to community, there are cultural norms, there's a sense of shame and embarrassment, repercussions, fear of being shunned by friends, family, and community. And all of these contribute to the silence where FGM exists. So in terms of the work we have to do, we have to work collaboratively with agencies and hopefully then we have some possibility to arrive at the true nature of what we're dealing with.
Thank you very much. Would either of you two like to add to that at all?
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity to speak as well. We absolutely know the importance of understanding prevalence in this area. We know that we need to direct our resources appropriately, and that's really, really difficult. In terms of numbers of cases that are reported to police, it's very low. Those cases are not coming from victims, survivors, witnesses. They're coming from other professionals such as health, education, social services. So we know we don't get a full picture exactly of what's happening. We know it's hidden. We are looking for opportunities around prevention. How do we maximise proactive opportunities to deal with those that are inflicting the harm on young women? And the information coming through is almost zero. So it makes it very, very difficult for us to think about what our response should be in place across policing, because the investigations themselves, and there have been 4 convictions, and that's all for FGM-related cases across nationally, is very, very specialist. And we have to work with often forces and agencies internationally as well. So it requires a very, very specialised policing response. We need the initial response to be of a really high standard because that's the only way we can ensure the trust of the victim and witnesses. But really, we're not seeing the reports coming through that we should be. I don't know what you think, Gillian.
Yeah, I mean, thank you again for inviting me to speak today. I've been involved in this area of work since 2009. Didn't know anything at all about it back then, but went on a very steep learning curve. I know that, from all the work that we've been doing in the West Midlands, that this is as has already been said, is a very, very hidden crime. It's something that's not talked about within communities themselves, let alone outside of agencies. And, it is against the law, so it's unlikely that people are going to talk to us. In terms of referrals, usually they're very, very low comparatively to what we suspect. And I think the reason, most of those referrals that we would have in the West Midlands as well were around safeguarding. So a teacher phoning in to say, so-and-so is going on holiday to Sudan, for example. They've talked about a special celebration and they're concerned that FGM is going to happen. Now, unfortunately, what teachers, what health professionals are going to be looking for prior to FGM happening is all very circumstantial, which again adds to the problem of us not being alerted, and that with cultural sensitivities, not wanting to be seen as being racist and jumping to conclusions. It's really tricky for professionals. And you've all also heard that the education is really poor around this area in all agencies. And so you're asking somebody to talk to a family about something which is very complex, and they don't have the tools or the skills to be able to do so. It's no wonder really that we don't have those reports coming in. I know we have a lot of criticism within the police. I'm saying we as if I'm still a police officer. I think I always will be. But really, this isn't just a police issue around prosecution. This is an everybody issue. We've all got to be brave about talking about it. We need to see it as child abuse. and we need to be asking pertinent questions without fear of being called racist. Because, as I've said, this is child abuse. There is evidence there to say this happens in certain communities. That is evidence for us to say this is why I'm asking these questions. Professionals need to be more confident about it. And I think that's why we don't have the amount of referrals come in that we could. In terms of FGM actually happening, I think the referrals that come through to the police are very few and far between. As I say, most of them are about children potentially at risk. And so safeguarding is put in place to protect them if needs be, once an assessment's been done. And I think those cases where we've had prosecutions are probably, I can't imagine we would have very many more about concerns where FGM has actually happened, if that makes sense. So it's difficult really for us to tell you an answer about prevalence. Because it really, really is the tip of the iceberg. It's an honour-based, it comes under that honour-based abuse umbrella, which we know is very hidden.
That's helpful, thank you very much. Just briefly coming back to you, Grainne, obviously you've talked about some quite significantly high numbers, which we understand, I think, why they're not being reported. From what you know, what percentage of those would you say are taking place here in the UK versus taking place abroad? And just to add on to that, at what age are you seeing, or do you think that these women and young girls are at risk of having to undergo FGM?
So in terms of prevalence, again, as the other panel member said, it's incredibly difficult to quantify. And like all agencies, we face the same problems in terms of reporting to us. The helpline was established in 2013 as a national safeguarding helpline, specifically to deal with context just relative to FGM. In the duration of that period, we have had 553 advice contacts, and only 17 of those have resulted in referrals. So it's a disproportionately low statistic, and we realise that. And again, we encounter so many barriers. So one of the issues that we see very often is just a lack of information. People contact us and it's based on suppositions. It's based on what they suspect may be happening, but in reaching an evidential criteria where we can meet our threshold to refer, it's incredibly difficult to do that. And so that may account for some element of the underreporting. The age that we see, it can range from anything. It can range from 3 until 15 years of age, but we have had children younger than 3 who we know who have been subject to FGM. Very often those children are taken from the UK on the premise of going to a special gathering, a ceremony, a family affair, something of that nature, and the FGM will happen in the country of their parents' origin. We also understand that during COVID, statistics relative to FGM occurring in the UK did rise because people just were prohibited from travelling during that period, and so there was a natural increase at that time. But being able to arrive at a figure where we can say it's X or Y or Z, we just can't do that. We just can't do it. We don't, among agencies, among police, among social care, among health visitors, among maternity services, we just don't have that kind of collaborative data at the moment. And that's definitely an area where we all need to improve.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
Could I possibly add to that? In terms of an investigation that we had in the West Midlands Police in 2012, again, going back to the conversations we've had with prior witnesses as well, we had the Sunday Times investigate undercover to a doctor and a dentist practice in Birmingham, and undercover reporter went into the surgeries and asked the doctor initially if they could help practice FGM on their nieces. The doctor said, "No, I can't, but I know somebody who can help you." Again, gave information of a dentist who was registered as a doctor and a dentist in their home country, but only as a dentist here. And he was approached again by the same undercover reporter. All of it was filmed on covert camera in a handbag. He said, "I can't help you. I actively campaign against it." They then go off camera for an hour, come back onto a camera for an hour, come back onto camera, and he's offering to do it for £750. Now, this was put in the Sunday Times without telling West Midlands Police anything at all about it. What would have been a better storyline? Cutter prosecuted, yeah? But no, unfortunately, I found out about it by going down to my newsagents on a Sunday morning and seeing Waris Deary, wonderful survivor activists, on the front page and a double page spread about this investigation. They were obviously arrested. They denied it, financial investigation, every investigation you can think of in collaboration with the CPS. We looked out in every avenue that we possibly could. The witness wouldn't come on board, wouldn't give us her name. We couldn't use the evidence on the camera because it was entrapment. CPS unfortunately had no other option than to say no further action. They were both struck off their dental and their medical registrars, but the reason why it's important for you to tell you this is because this isn't just about girls going abroad. This is about girls being cut in there in the UK. It's not just about women orchestrating this. It's about men, and it's also about potentially professionals. Okay. So we need to be really clear that this isn't just one line that we need to be looking down. We need to be really keeping an open mind. We do have intelligence to suggest that FGM is happening here in the UK, in specific cities in the UK. We don't have names, unfortunately. One thing I always press when I'm training professionals is about them having those conversations with those communities that they have trusted relationships with. You know, open that conversation. Let's try and find out. But again, professionals, lack of training, are unwilling most of the time to do that, to be able to give us the information to get in there to tackle those cutters. But we do, I mean, one of the midwifery clinics in London, going back 12 years ago, used to hand out anonymous questionnaires. And in those questionnaires, they were able to ask questions like, is FGM happening in the UK? Where is it happening in the UK? And at that time, it was pointing towards Birmingham. You know, people were saying anonymously from communities that it is happening in Birmingham. And yet here we are still, years later, with more than we had in terms of prosecutions. And prosecutions, don't get me wrong, is not the answer to this. But we need to be getting at those cutters here in the UK because they are operating here in the UK.
Just following on from that with you, if Jill or Gillian? Jill. Just following on from that, Jill, how would you judge the government's role and leadership in tackling FGM?
I think historically, as I think Janet talked about, following the collegiate guidance, we were all involved. You know, we all came together in a really strong stakeholder group at the Home Office, where we pushed for change. We had the Girls' Summit. We had a lot of action, a lot of money put into it. The FGM unit created, change of legislation with the Serious Crime Act. We had campaigns. We had, and obviously the government can't keep up that level of intensity on one subject, but it has diminished significantly to the point where it's almost like it's forgotten about now. And even, may I say, the campaign which I was involved with when I was on secondment to the FGM unit in 2018, 2019, which involved survivors appearing on posters, you know, and campaigning for change. That campaign, I was upset to find, had been decommissioned by the Home Secretary, leaving us with no campaign nationally that professionals can use to advertise services, or, you know, it's a very sensitive subject. It has to be done very sensitively, and I think by government leading that, we've got stakeholders who can advise on that and have that corporate approach will give people confidence and professionals confidence to display materials and ask questions.
Before you go in, when was that decommissioned?
A couple of years ago. I think it was Priti Patel who decommissioned.
Okay, thank you.
So from your experience, Jill, who's better placed, do you think, to tackle FGM? Is it central government, or is it local authorities, or is it a combination of both?
It's a combination, most definitely.
And what role do you think both should play?
Well, I think it's funding locally, isn't it, in terms of giving the local, just ensuring that it's on delivery plans, for actions, and like you were saying earlier about holding people to account. You know, having actions at high-level meetings to say, you know, what are you doing? Come back to me to tell me. And that's only, unfortunately, when people will do things, and we need to keep on top of it. But in terms of government, you know, I know Jess Phillips very well, and I know that she's going to do some great things in this area. So I have every faith in her. But I really do feel that we need, at the very least, a campaign and more funding in terms of grassroots, both in countries where this is practiced, but also here in the UK. For unfortunately, the ones that are doing a lot of good are those small organisations which are survivor-led, which is led because of passion, and because they haven't got status within charity status, and don't have perhaps the people to go to in terms of how to write a successful application. They're not getting the funding, and they're perhaps the people who need that. Okay,
thank you.
Thank you very much, Jill, and then I'm going to come to you, Angela. What training do police officers have to support victims of FGM, and is it standardised across all of the forces or not?
No, I mean, College of Policing do have some e-learning packages which are available, but are generally over public protection. I don't know whether that's changed since I've retired. But certainly I can really speak for the West Midlands Police in that we gave all officers mandatory training under Operation Sentinel, which was an operation leading awareness internally and externally around vulnerable victims and hidden crimes. So they all had mandatory training. Everybody in the force had mandatory training given by me. And within the West Midlands, new recruits have training, CID officers have training, child abuse investigators have training, sexual offence officers have training specifically around FGM. And obviously that is an ongoing process. Yeah. I can't speak for other forces other than in my new business Honour Me, I have been asked to go into other forces to give FGM training, and what is apparent is that maybe they have had some training, but it isn't anything like they would have had with me in terms of the depth and clarity and the emotion that comes with it.
Thank you. Angela, if you wanted to touch on that as well, but I really wanted to know, how does the Foreign Office and the Home Office work with police to share intelligence of risks of girls being taken out of the UK to undergo FGM? In particular, we've heard cases where if you've got dual citizenship, they'll go out on one passport or go to Turkey on one passport and go to another country with a different passport. How is that working, and could it work better?
Okay, just to come back to the question around training, I think it's important just to acknowledge that. So, for example, I chair a silver group which includes force leads from all over the country, and we talk very much about what's good practice and what training should look like. There is definitely examples across the country of good practice, little areas of good practice. As you say, Jill, some of the NGOs providing training to officers, but we're actually currently working with the College of Policing around some advice notes, which are first responder advice notes, and then those for secondary investigators, and a background note as well to kind of level up understanding around the offence types. But those the training itself is not mandated, and that's a challenge for us because with such a lot of different priorities across policing, to get that kind of voice heard nationally is very, very difficult. So something that we're working on. In terms of the kind of intelligence picture, so there's the piece around what we know in this country. And a couple of years ago, we tried an approach with Crime Stoppers, which is obviously anonymous, to try and increase the sort of intelligence flow coming through. But in terms of the international piece as well, it's really important. So cases that are live, that are brought to our attention, would be picked up. It's definitely the case, that suggestion, and again, it's intelligence rather than really clear information that people will travel from country to country before they potentially land in the final destination. What we're really lucky at the moment, we're obviously able to put in place FGM protection orders, and we've got a really tried and tested system of getting those and accessing those through our local authorities generally. But there is, I think, a really good opportunity around that kind of central piece, building that really consistent good practice with the new for National Centre for Foreign and Public Protection that the Home Office are putting into place at the moment. So we're hoping that's a really good opportunity to raise cases across all harmful practices, but including FGM.
Thank you. Just the last question from me. Jill, you mentioned about convictions and prosecutions. There's only been 3 convictions for FGM in England and Wales. What more needs to be done to increase the number of prosecutions and convictions for FGM, do you think?
I think it's really important that we don't get hyper-fixated on prosecution. If prosecution is important, it sends a very strong message to communities that this is against the law and it will be upheld. However, I think prevention is what we need to be focusing on more. There are many, many reasons why we haven't had prosecutions. We've touched on one already about the fact that the professionals aren't trained, they don't feel confident enough to ask the questions, therefore the referrals don't come through. Children don't want to give evidence against their parents. Whilst West Midlands Police were criticised once about putting a tweet out about safeguarding is our first responsibility, which it is obviously, and the interpretation was that we wouldn't prosecute. Right, that's not the case, but in working together to safeguard children, the best interest of the child is paramount. So if you've got a traumatised child who, her best interest isn't necessarily going and standing in before a court and giving evidence against her parents or her grandmother. Okay, so it wouldn't always follow that we would go down that route. Okay, I know there's a lot of controversy around that, but it's got to be that whatever's in the child's best interests comes first. But there are lots of other issues around. We don't have very many doctors who are specialised in being an expert witness in court around FGM. In fact, I don't know the current situation because we did have 2, but I'm pretty sure that they may have retired. And also in terms of examination of children for FGM, we've got very few who are able to identify and confident enough to give evidence in court. I think we've come across problems before with equipment. Whenever an examination for FGM is carried out, it will be videoed so that we don't have to re-examine that child. And some of those instruments are old, produce a blurry picture, and so when they are peer reviewed by experts, they can't actually see properly what they're looking at. So we've had problems with that, and then it can be 2 months, 3 months down the line before the experts can actually see the child to re-examine, in which case causes further trauma for the child. And in some cases with type 4, that evidence may have gone. I think, sorry, I've probably gone off on a tangent, which I'm good at doing with this subject.
No, and I wish that we had like a whole day for each panel. I'm just trying to make sure that we get to the end of our questions, and I'm trying to manage everybody's questions as well. I think that's really, really helpful. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Samantha now around child protection specifically.
Grainne, it would be really good to understand more about the work that the NSPCC is doing on preventing FGM and supporting survivors through abuse through the helpline. If you wouldn't mind in part of your response talking about the types of calls that you receive, whether they're from concerned professions, survivors, or even people perhaps reporting others who are perpetrating FGM. And also if you can touch on the work government has had, whether it's been involved and whether that's included any funding.
When the helpline was established in 2013, there was initially some funding from the government that was provided to it. However, that was short-lived, and so now the funding comes out of the main helpline NSPCC fund. So it's all self-funded because the NSPCC have identified the need for this national safeguarding helpline. In terms of the contacts we receive, predominantly these are from professionals, so mostly schools, teachers and DSLs who will contact us seeking advice. When they contact us, it is incredibly difficult to triage these calls because of the lack of information. So they will come to us initially and say that they have concerns that a child may be being removed from school, or a child has returned from school after a long period abroad or a period of absence. Very often what we see is that they lack the confidence to actually have very preliminary conversations with families. So we will say things like, have you spoken to the family to understand why the child has been absent from school? And they'll say, no, we don't feel confident enough to do that. And so there are conversations then that we have to have around safeguarding is everyone's concern. It's everyone's priority, and we have to put the needs of these children first. We understand these conversations are uncomfortable. We have them every single day, but if you want to protect children, you have to have these conversations. So we deal with a lot of those inquiries. We also have inquiries from medical professionals, although these would not be, we wouldn't see as many in number. So very often we would get calls from GP services, and they would be seeking advice around mandatory reporting and what their obligation is in relation to that. A lesser number of the contacts are actually from survivors of FGM, although recently we have seen an increase in that. Also, Childline, who we work alongside, they have seen children actually reaching out and contacting them, although again, the numbers are very, very low. In the last 3 years, it's been less than 15 children. And there's a myriad of reasons for this. These practices are very normalized, they're very hidden. There's the dichotomy of protector and abuser that people are very reluctant to engage in conversations with. So in terms of what we're seeing, it's incredibly difficult to actually enact safeguarding in response to these calls, because the limitations of the information just mean that unfortunately referrals are not able to be made. And I think that has a knock-on effect in terms of what we see in children's services, in police, in the FCDO, in the forced marriage unit. So it's a really difficult issue to solve.
Thank you.
Thank you. Grainne, we've got some questions around mandatory reporting and teachers and professionals. If we can follow those up with you in writing, that would be great. Sorry, we are so squeezed for time.
That's fine, no problem at all.
Thank you, Samantha. David.
Thank you very much. Just to finish off, we're just going to look at FGM protection orders. So I think I'll come to you first, Angela, if that's okay. How effective do you think FGM protection orders actually are?
I think they are effective. I think they're a really good way of involving the police and children's social care, actually working together, working collaboratively, and coming up with the most holistic response in the individual case. So what that does, it means we get a proper case understanding to understand the risk. We talked some previous submissions around the different power within the family and the community, and it's really important to get that right in order to put in place the most appropriate FGM protection order. So I do like them. There are cases sometimes when police will take out the FGMPO because perhaps children's social care don't necessarily think the risk is there in that case. So it does allow that bit of autonomy as well across the professionals that are working on the case.
Jill or Grainne, do you have different views, or would you like to?
Yeah, I mean, I work with the forced marriage unit, training police and social services on protection orders, and I have obtained orders myself operationally. Protection orders are great. They're not always appropriate. They are really useful in terms of the fact that the threshold for obtaining one is quite low. It's not like other protection orders. So you have to prove real harm rather than significant harm. They're really easy to get. I'll give you an example of an order that I got, which actually repatriated children. And that is the beauty of these orders, is if you're struggling with somebody who's already gone abroad, and you want them back into the UK, they're great at being able to bring them back into the UK, particularly where you've got countries which are difficult for our embassies to negotiate or have conversations that wouldn't put that victim at further risk. So this case I had coming told me about a woman who'd be coming into the airport the following day. Her children were being left in this particular country. It was in Africa, where prevalence is high. And she was told us the flight number she was coming in on. Obtained a protection order to be served on her the next day when she arrived. She was arrested, and it was served on her. Her phone call to her family abroad. She was coming back to the UK, she said, because she didn't want to see her children harmed. But we know that this is honour is about the external family and community as well, and that the pressure was there, and she got no say in it. So she phoned her family at home, who said, this order says that the children can't be cut and they must be brought back to the UK within 5 days, because otherwise I'm in breach of this protection order and I could go to prison for 5 years. And the power of that brought those children back. They were medically examined, they hadn't had FGM, we'll never know whether they were going to or not. The important fact is now that they're protected by that order until at least the age of 18. And that can be assessed properly. So I think that they're not always appropriate, but I think they are really important in terms of our toolkit in protecting girls.
Thanks. Grainne, did you have anything to add?
No, we would only comment on it from a safeguarding perspective.
No, thank you. And final question from me. The use of protection orders has declined in recent years. So does this reflect a fall in the risk of girls undergoing FGM? If not, why do you think they've declined? So I'll come to you, Jill, because you're shaking your head.
Quite animated, yes.
Yeah.
I think protection orders, both forced marriage and FGM protection orders, based on the same legislation, have never been well known about. I don't think professionals know about them as much about them, and I certainly don't think heads of service or even legal services within social services are well aware, because the amount of times I get pushback saying the threshold's not met. Threshold isn't significant harm. I've got it on anonymous information before. You know, you don't need that level of so there is an education aspect, which won't surprise you. But also, I think that, sorry, I'm having a menopausal moment.
This is a good committee to have that.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, will you there?
The decline.
Yes.
How embarrassing. So they've never been sought. They've never been sought for very much anyway. The numbers have always been low. And when I was seconded to the FGM unit, that was my purpose for the secondment. It was to devise and deliver a series of roadshows around the UK to increase those numbers. So I worked with Ministry of Justice, with some judges. We held day-long presentations around the UK, multi-agency, and I'll never know whether it's because of the roadshows or not, but the numbers did significantly rise after those and during those roadshows, and they've declined again. I don't think it's anything to do with the fact that the issue has gone away. I think it's to do with the fact that professionals are strapped because they've got too much to do in too little time. There is a lack of awareness of what they are and what they can do on every level. And they're seen as it's going to take too much time.
Okay. Anything quickly to add, Angela or Grainne?
I don't really, Grainne. I would only say, as you said, it's one of the many possible tactics within the toolkit. So it's something to think about wider safeguarding. I know there's probably a point where, whenever there's an FGM case, there was an expectation around getting an order. But as we've a lot of the times, the cases that come forward are actually safeguarding risks, and professionals have different ways of managing those as well. So we would like to see more orders, absolutely, but I do think we're getting quite good at nuancing our response to safeguarding as these cases come forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, David. And thank you to you three as well. Really, really informative session, which I say I could have quite easily had a session for each of the panels. So thank you so much. We will follow up with the questions that we didn't get to ask as well. And if you have anything else that you think you wish you'd said, whether it was a menopausal moment or not, and you want us to know about it, please do write in and work with Danny and the rest of the team. Thank you very much. That brings this session to a close. Order.